Recently, there's been a lot of debate around the role of social media in our lives and its impact on our mental health. And with this in mind, I've been reflecting on my own social media use. And as some of you might know, there's a way to check how much time you're spending on different apps on your phones. And for those of you who do know, this feels a little bit daunting. It's almost like stepping on the scales after you've had a really overindulgent holiday period. But I worked up the courage to check my social media app usage, and I found I'm in fact dead average, spending 2 hours a day primarily across 3 prominent social media platforms. When I was a kid, my mum, who has a really strong work ethic, used to find me sitting around doing nothing. And she would say, "Kim, why don't you go and find something constructive to do?" And so I started thinking, this 2 hours a day, is this really constructive for me? Immediately, I found myself rationalizing my social media use. These apps are a great way of staying in touch with our friends, keeping in touch with what's going on in our communities and the world around us. But I study behavioral addictions and problematic social media use, and so I know a little bit better than that. And it doesn't really feel like that's how I'm spending those 2 hours every day. And I know that there's these terms like meme addictions, having a TikTok habit, being addicted to brain rot and doom scrolling. And these reflect a darker side of social media use. And while a lot of the discussion around this is really focused on how this is harming or potentially harming our kids and our young people, if we're being really honest with ourselves, it's affecting us too. Last year, Australia's Mapping Social Cohesion report found that fewer Australians feel optimistic or happy, fewer Australians feel as if they belong, and our trust in one another is at an all-time low. How could this be? My theory is that these feelings are shaped by a world presented to us through social media, through an algorithm, rather than what's actually around us. And so when I think about my social media use, I think more of it is more destructive than constructive. And this is a belief shared by my peers in fields of behavioral addiction, social and developmental psychology, and political science. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering if I'm going to spend my entire talk making you feel bad about your social media use. I promise I'm not. Instead, I have something of a proposition I'd like to talk to you about. One of the terms that's come from the 2online community is this expression, touch grass. To touch grass is to go and do something outside in the real world, as opposed to presumably inside on a screen, a laptop, or a smartphone. And while in these communities it's intended as a bit of an insult, I think it's time we try and reclaim the word and use it as a call to action. So how can we do this? I've got 2 ideas I'd like to run by you. The first is quite easy. We call it informal social connection. A lot of us have been doing it before we came in tonight. A lot of us will do it in the break. Informal social connection is things like having a chat with a neighbor in your apartment complex. It's calling a loved one and saying g'day. It's going and visiting some of our relatives. Researchers from the University of Canberra found that of all the ways we can connect with one another, informal social connection probably gives us the biggest bang for our buck. In fact, the researchers concluded that if Australians just did this 10% more, it would lift tens of thousands of us to a 7 out of 10 on a life satisfaction index. That's the national average. Another way we can think about touching grass is through volunteering. Volunteering is a really interesting concept for social scientists to study because it doesn't really make much sense. Why would people give up their time and energy for no apparent material gain? And yet we know from decades of research that volunteers experience greater sense of health and well-being, reduced symptoms of depression, and increased feelings of things like pride and empowerment. So we know these things are good for us, but it's important to reflect on why. The 2 big drivers of these behaviors are reciprocity and belonging. We like to do things for one another in the expectation that others will do things for us. And we like to feel a part of each other's lives and supported in doing things. These 2 forces have shaped our worlds for thousands of years, and there's a good reason for that. They've helped us to survive in social groups. When we think about socializing in the age of social media, it feels harder than it used to. It's as if our social muscles have kind of atrophied. When we go outside, we wear noise-cancelling headphones. When we're in public, we whip out our phones and start scrolling through our feeds. But if we think about it, we've been engaging in social behaviours for many thousands of years. So it's probably a lot like riding a bike, and we're just a little bit rusty. With this idea in mind, like all great social scientists should do at least once, I conducted an experiment on myself, and I signed up for a volunteering experience. I volunteered a little bit before, but I tried something completely different and out of my comfort zone. And I spent a couple of hours of a weeknight meeting new people who really had nothing in common other than giving up their time and effort to go and volunteer for something. I learned a bunch of really cool and unique skills, and I left that experience feeling quite elated and excited to do it again. But as a good social scientist, once we have kind of proof of concept, we like to reflect and have a look at the data. I realized in this 2-hour experience, I didn't really look at my phone at all. And when I checked my app usage, this was reflected there. I had fewer phone pickups. And really importantly, my phone usage was more instrumental than social media based, which means I was using my phone for things phones were designed for. One of those things was calling my dad. Now my dad, he's in his 70s, he's had a very long life full of volunteering experiences. And on the drive home, I felt it really important to share my experience with him and connect with him on that level. And I realized in doing this, I'd inadvertently tick the box for informal social connection as well. When people know I study behavioral addictions and social media use, they ask me questions like, are these apps really that bad for us? Should I be deleting my apps? Should I be removing my accounts? I think there's a better question we can ask of ourselves. When's the last time I touched some grass? We can train self-control, we can lock ourselves out of our apps, we can set timers, and these things may well reduce the amount of time we're spending on social media. But if we don't do something constructive with that time, we're going to be hard-pressed reversing the social cohesion trend. And so my hope for all of us is we start working these social muscles a bit more and get back on our collective bikes so that things like informal social connection and volunteering don't feel so effortful and feel like they used to feel, kind of automatic, almost expected. You don't have to do anything crazy. You can start small, bring a friend or two, try a few different things until you find something that grabs you. Worst case scenario, you'll find you're reaching for your phone a bit less and mindlessly scrolling through your feed less often. Best case scenario, you might find a sense of fulfillment and connection that's seemed a bit elusive lately. You might even live a bit longer. So my challenge to you in the weeks ahead, coming months, or the rest of this year, is to avoid the algorithm, touch some grass, and find something constructive to do.